Hello and welcome to TES Live. My name's Sarah Canane and I am delighted to be welcome today Simon Mayo. Hello.
How are you?
I'm dandy, thank you. How
Good,
are you?
I'm even more dandy than you.
That is amazing.
Are people watching now?
I believe people are watching now, yes.
How do we know that?
How do we know that?
Yeah.
We don't. We just have to trust that people are watching.
Can they prove to us that they're there?
I don't know if you can wave or possibly send us a tweet or email us. You can do any of those things. If you do want to ask any questions during this chat, you can do that by tweeting us using the hashtag TESLive, or you can email us at webchat@tes.co.uk. Now, Simon here is perhaps best known for his work as a BBC radio presenter. However, last year he became a successful children's author with the publication of his book Itch, and the sequel to that book, Itch Rocks, I believe hit shelves a couple of weeks ago.
No, just last Thursday.
Last Thursday.
Just
so
last Thursday. It's fresh, not even a week old.
Fantastic. Now, can you explain to me, sort of, obviously you've done quite a lot of work as a DJ. How did you go from that to becoming an author? Was it something you always wanted to do?
No. It wasn't at all. I'm somewhat surprised to find myself writing at all. I just wanted to be a radio presenter. That's what I wanted to be when I was growing up. The thing about moving to the book was a whole series of events. One of, and I can't remember which order they all happened in. One of which was my son, who was 10 at the time, starting to really get interested in science and coming back and talking about science and really not anything else. That was one thing. Secondly, I was doing a show on BBC Radio 5 Live, and I was starting to get interested in science myself, and we'd made a point of treating science properly, which I don't think it has been by broadcast media in the past, and so we invited the best scientists that we could find to come on and explain their work, and we didn't give them 5 minutes or 10 minutes, we gave them half an hour, 40 minutes, which really, if you're dealing with things like dark matter or the Hadron Collider or stuff like that, you need that time to explain everything. So there were a number of things happening at the same time. And then I left 5 Live and went to Radio 2, and I had time available. And I then discovered in the process of, I thought I'd write a short story for my son. And I came across this phrase, element hunter, which is the phrase which is used to describe people who collect the periodic table. So I thought it was a great thing. Who wouldn't want to be an element hunter? You know, particularly if you're 12, 13, 14, being an element hunter, that would be fantastic. But I thought someone else will have thought of this before, and so I did some extensive research, i.e. a lot of time on the internet, and discovered that no, they hadn't. And so I thought, well, I'll do that then. And once I'd started that process, I couldn't stop, and it was like being obsessed by a subject, consumed by it, and I would wake up in the middle of the night and worry about plot lines, and I was just writing. I didn't know what I was doing. I just wrote, and then eventually sort of got it together in some kind of shape, and then what I thought was going to be a couple of sides of A4 became 400 sides of A4, and my son liked it, and so then I thought, okay, well, maybe I could do something else with it. So it was a long, strange, fortuitous series of events by which I end up now having written the second one. But it's been great. It's been a fantastic journey to get to my age and be doing something completely different. It's been great, but that's how I've ended up being an author. That
is really interesting. So it wasn't out of a desire to become a writer, just a sort of real passion for the subject matter.
It was the story. It was the thought of it. It was the story. It was the wanting to do a story for my son, and then thinking, well, actually, if it's good for Joe, maybe it'll work for other kids. And so I wasn't on a mission to explain science to kids because I'm not a scientist. You know, I'm a broadcaster. History and politics is the subject I did at university. But I worked very hard to. I mean, I've always enjoyed research anyway, and I worked very hard to make the science work. So Itch is 14 and he's a school kid and he goes to the local school in Cornwall and he's nuts about the periodic table. So I had to make sure that the world in which he operates, you know, he doesn't have any special powers, he doesn't, you know, he's not a wizard, he's not a vampire. I had to make sure that it all worked, so that all the science in the book works within the world of science that is true and is real. So I had some top-class scientists help me out, just to make sure.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you, because there's a lot of very specific science in the book. Was there any one person who particularly helped you or influenced you in that regard?
No, there are two that I would mention. One is Professor Andrea Sella, who's a chemist at UCL, who has made helpful suggestions as I go through. And the other is Professor Paddy Regan, who's a professor of nuclear physics at Surrey University. And I've spent a considerable amount of time talking to both of these guys, just to make sure that, because the whole point is, in the first book, Itch discovers a new element. He discovers some rocks which are behaving in a very unusual way, ways in which rocks have never behaved before. And it turns out that so the periodic table runs to 118, as I'm sure you know. But this rock is sending back all the characteristics of a rock which would sit at 126 on the element of the periodic table. And this doesn't exist. It could exist at some stage, but at the moment it doesn't exist. And it took me a while to get my head around the fact that there is this thing which is called the island of stability, which scientists have talked about for a while, which is an idea that, all the rocks at the top end of the table are very unstable, and they're not really rocks anyway. They just exist for fractions of a second, and they're made in labs. But there is this thought that at the super heavy end, once you get beyond 121, 122, that these rocks could exist, and they would be physical, and they would sit on this table and be quite dangerous. So I thought, okay, well, if you're an element hunter, this is the greatest thing ever, the fact that there might be something no one else has seen before. So I went with that as the story. But the island of stability is talked about by proper scientists and not just by me.
And Itch mentions in the book about sort of the way science is sort of described in the names that are used, and he said they're not necessarily the most interesting. Are you hoping that your books will get more kids interested in studying science and perhaps becoming element hunters themselves? Well,
yeah, I still think the idea of being an element hunter is a fantastically exciting thing. And if I was 10, 11, 12, I think in fact, my son has started collecting the periodic table, so that's a strange thing. But as I said, I didn't start out with a mission to convince people that science is cool. All this is an exciting story. It just so happens that the thing about it is that Itch is an element hunter. And he struggles all the way through the book to persuade anybody that what he does is exciting. Everyone. So as you come to the book, we're kind of on the side of his sister and his cousin and his mother, who go, "What? Really? Is this really that exciting? I know you're excited." So there's always that tension. What's interesting is, while there's a concern to get boys reading, in the science community there is a concern to get girls interested in science.
Yeah.
So it might be that there are two things happening here, because I worked very hard to make the book as female as possible, so that Itch has his cousin Jacqueline, who's known as cousin Jack, and Jack and Chloe. They're the three of them. So and the girls are far more streetwise than Itch is. Itch is the scientist, but Chloe and Jack between them keep him rooted and tell him he's being an idiot, which he is periodically, I guess you could say. So I just wanted to write a great book. That's all I wanted, or the best book that I could possibly do. And if, as a result of that, kids start thinking scientifically and explore scientifically and ask more questions, then that's a bonus.
Obviously, there are quite a few people at the moment who are sort of known names, as it were, going out and sort of going into children's writing.
Are you talking about celebrity authors?
I may be, possibly. Yes.
Ghastly idea.
Were you worried that there might be a certain stigma attached?
Yeah. Well, my original suggestion to Random House, the publishers, was that I write under a different name, because having interviewed authors for many years and a few celebrity authors, I thought the idea of a celebrity, really, celebrity? And they listened to me for about 30 seconds and then told me I was mad, because obviously you need to get all the promotion that you can for a book. And while it probably helped get me to first base, the thing I keep on saying to people, and I explained, I sent an email to Anthony Horowitz, who's a friend, and said, "Look, Anthony, I know celebrity authors are ghastly, but you need to know I've written this book, and I want it to be as successful as possible. But I couldn't not write it just because I'm known somewhere else for doing other things." And the key point is, the people that I'm writing for, maybe the people who are watching this now, they don't listen to radio too. I play pop music for old people. For me, I've just written a book. Now they'll either like this book or they won't. The fact that I'm on the radio is no odds to them at all. And most celebrity writers write for people who know who they are.
Yeah.
And I've written for people who don't know who I am. So it sort of is and sort of isn't. But the thing that will sell the book or not is word of mouth. And if kids like the book, they'll tell their friends. And if they don't, they'll also say that to their friends. So the celebrity status doesn't really get you very far. I mean, if Justin Bieber wrote a book, well, yesterday it would have sold quite well. Maybe today not quite so well. But you know what I mean is that's the market. They know who he is. They know who Rihanna is. They know who Daniel Radcliffe is. They don't know who Radio 2 presenters are. So this is just either a good book or it isn't.
I wanted to ask you about the book itself. There are quite a lot of interesting names in there, not least Itch himself.
Yeah.
Where did you get the sort of inspirations for those sort of names and places?
Itchingham Loft is you're right, is the main character, and his main protagonist is Nathaniel Flowerdew, and both those characters were real people. They both were vicars in East Anglia in the 17th century. They both came from. I was going around. There's a beautiful church in Blythburgh called Blythburgh Church, surprisingly, and it's known as the Cathedral of the Marshes. And there's a plaque on the wall of all the people who've been vicar going back to like the 14th century and earlier, I think. And in the 17th century, 1617, I think, Itchingham Loft was the vicar of Blythburgh, and he was replaced by Nathaniel Flowerdew. And on the plaque it says, Nathaniel Flowerdew, brackets, intruder, close brackets. And that's what attracted me to these names, because I thought, why would you put on a plaque of people who have been vicars of your church? They clearly wanted to say something. They clearly wanted to say, this guy was an idiot, or this guy was horrible, or this guy, he's intruder. And I think, as far as I can make out, what happened is that Nathaniel Flowerdew was intruded into the parish by Cromwell, and that Itchingham Loft was probably Catholic or Papist, you know, and Nathaniel Flowerdew was Puritan, and so he would say he was kicked out. So anyway, whatever the story was, they were both priests in East Anglia in the 17th century. But it was the name. So, and I took a photo. This was 5 years ago. I took a photograph of the plaque just so that I thought, okay, well, who knows when that might come into some kind of use. And so when I was writing the story, it was the first name that occurred to me. Itchingham Loft. I don't know anyone called Itchingham. I've been around the country talking to schools about this book, and you meet people with all kinds of names. Some crazy names, some people named after characters in Star Trek, you know, and you're thinking, parents, what are you thinking of? Anyway, but I haven't met anyone called Itchingham, and of course it reduces fantastically to Itch, and so it becomes a memorable name, so it came from there, really. So
we may see in sort of 10, 20 years' time a whole host of children.
Well, if there are now any Itches or Itchinghams, and I kind of like the name now, I've lived with it for a couple of years, and I don't really quite like it. I think you can conclusively say it comes from here, because as far as I know, there are no Itchinghams at all anywhere in Britain, and haven't been for a long time.
Okay. Well, if you know any different, do get in touch.
Yeah, absolutely.
Itch collects elements, but he seems to have quite a sort of that sort of inquiring mind, because he'd collected other things before he collected elements. Did any of that come from your own sort of psyche? Do you have any collections or enjoy collecting things?
No. I mean, when I was 13, I think I collected matchboxes and matchbox labels for about a week, and that was it. The rest of the things that I mentioned in the book were collected by my son, I think, or my children at various times. But when you're 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, you like to collect. It's and beyond, you know, it's fun to collect. And we've had people in schools collecting all kinds of things, you know, jars of Marmite, pebbles, pieces of paper. You know, I mean, people, just because it's fun to collect. So that's what I was trying to tap into, really, that mindset of people. You know, this is who I am. I identify myself by my collection of footballs, or by my collection of wigs, or my collection of tables, or whatever it is, you know. And Itch is a collector of the periodic table.
Is there any particular element that you would quite like to own?
Gold.
Yeah, actually, that's quite sensible, I think.
It's pretty good if you're going to collect anything. I think. I mean, there's some things that you wouldn't want to collect. Like, well, in fact, it's illegal to collect some of the radioactive ones. Obviously, you're going to want to have too much polonium in your house. But gold, that's a pretty good place to start, I would say.
Were you always intending to write an Itch sequel? Was it always going to be?
No, it was just going to stand on. It was just going to stand on its own. So the first book is a complete story.
Yeah.
And then when Random House said they'd publish it, they wanted to. So that then became clear. And then when that was all going swimmingly, they thought, well, let's have some more. So I'm working on the third at the moment, and I think there'll be a fourth, maybe a fifth, who knows? But it sort of lends itself to periodic telling, again, to coin the phrase. That there is a different adventure to be had, which I'm writing at the moment. But Itch Rocks is very much a continuation of the first story, as Itch tries to deal with these extraordinary rocks which have been delivered to him, and he has to work out what to do with them. And he thinks he's dealt with them at the end of the first book, but they've come back to haunt him.
And will the rocks continue to haunt him in the third book? Can you reveal anything about it?
I can't reveal anything at all.
Okie dokes. You seem to know quite a lot about schools. I mean, Itch attends an academy. You seem to know quite a lot about teachers, how they work. Do you have any involvement in schools or knowledge of sort of?
My father was a head teacher. My sister is a head teacher. My mother taught. My niece is a teacher. So I think I was brought up in a teaching house. And I think in fact, before I got a job at Radio Nottingham, I got a place at the University of Nottingham to do a postgraduate certificate of education. So I think if I hadn't ended up with a proper job, I'd have been a teacher. So yes, and I have.
Not that teaching's not a proper job, of course.
No, I'm very pro teacher, and always have been. In fact, Dr. Dart, who's the head teacher of the Cornwall Academy in the book, is sort of based on my sister, really. And I know we have a lot of teachers who listen to Drive Time, because it's it's a good time for them, and they sit in their classroom marking, or they're driving home from school and listening, and they like the fact we do a book club every fortnight, and so it's a very book-based program, and I'm often getting messages about Ofsted inspections, and the teachers have been told it's Ofsted tomorrow and they're panicking, or they've just had a good Ofsted, or whatever it is. So respect for teachers. In fact, when I did my first book talk, which was about a year ago at Ilford High School, where I was yesterday actually, they hello if they're watching. I stood up, and I was very nervous to start with, because I'd never stood up in front of 250 boys, as it was, and a few girls. And after 5 minutes, I relaxed and thought, oh no, I can do this. And I did think that there is something in the DNA, something about teaching, and I think actually standing up in front of a classroom or a school hall full of kids has been fantastically exciting, and I've enjoyed it enormously. And the great thing is, all I have to be is slightly more interesting than double geography or double maths, or that's it. So which is great. So when I finished my first talk at Ilford, I texted my sister and said, this teaching lark is easy. I don't know what you're complaining about. It was great. It went very well. It didn't go particularly well, that text, but anyway, that's yes. So there is teaching very much part of the Mayo family.
What books did you enjoy reading as a child?
Well, at this age, the books that I remember the most actually have just been, I think they've just been republished. Willard Price wrote a series of books about two brothers who went around the world collecting animals for their father's zoo. And it was Amazon adventure, then it was underwater adventure, it was volcano adventure. And at the end of each book, it would sort of briefly set up their next escapade. And it does read in a very old-fashioned way now. There's never any query about what they're doing, capturing these animals and taking them off to their father's zoo. But it was a book of its time, and I thought that, and I remember I thought they were terrific and very exciting, great page turners, and again very episodic. So Willard Price could send his boys anywhere, and just tell the story about how they were trying to get these latest animals captured. So I think they're the books that I remember the most from this period. When I was 10, 11, 12.
And obviously we're talking just ahead of World Book Day, which is on Thursday. Why?
Am I supposed to do something important on Thursday? I think I am. Shall I dress as my favourite character?
Yes, please do. What would it be?
Am I allowed to? No, can I mention? Well, I'll go. I can't really go dressed as a 14-year-old schoolboy, can I? So I'll go dressed as his science teacher. I'll be dressed as Nathaniel Flowerdew, who goes to the gym a lot and is just dressed normally. So I'll do that.
Okay, well that's
Anyway,
that's
sorry.
good. So that's
Well
good.
put,
People now know when they see you on Thursday, you may look like you're dressed normally, but you're actually an evil science teacher.
I'm an evil science teacher. Yeah.
Excellent. Why are books and storytelling so important?
Well, I think you could get very deep and profound and philosophical and academic about it, but there are very few things in life that are as enjoyable as having a story being told to you or you getting lost in a story. And when it's a very old-fashioned thing, and whether you're reading it on a computer screen, whether you're reading it on an iPad, or whether you're turning the page of an old-fashioned book, it's a delight. It's just the most extraordinary experience. And if it's a book that you think is yours, or you have some kind of identity with, which I think you feel particularly when you're younger, I think they're the books that stay with you. If you empathise with the character, if you shed a tear when something sad happens, if you're excited or nervous, or if your heart rate increases when the tension is ratcheted up, I think it's a very powerful moment, and people remember when that happens. So I mean, it's just that it's the basis of telling great stories and with characters that people remember, and that with people and guys that you empathise with, and you want to be on their side, because you soon realise if you're reading a rubbish book that you don't care what happens to any of them, and so you might last another 20 pages and then you'll stop. So I think that's the power. The way by which the stories are distributed will change, and is changing. So, but if whether you're reading electronically or whether you're reading on a piece of wood, I don't think it matters.
Libraries have also been in the news quite a bit recently. I mean, obviously, some authors such as Julia Donaldson really campaigning hard to save libraries. And then on the other side of the debate, there's Terry Deary, who wrote the Horrible History series, saying maybe they should be allowed to die off. Do you have a particular opinion or stance on libraries?
He certainly stoked a hornet's nest. Well, I think where the debate should be. Well, I would start it with the school library, really, and that is that in all the schools that I've been to, the one thing that they have in common, I mean, and there'll be grammar schools, and there'll be primary schools, and there'll be comprehensive schools, and there'll be private schools, they all have a library and a librarian at the heart of the school. That's the one common link, and an ethos and an approach in the school, which doesn't come from money, it just comes from, although money helps clearly, it just comes from an approach from the librarian, which permeates then through the rest of the school, that books matter, that the library matters, and come to the library. It's a nice place. Get a book. Sit here. Do some. That kind of ethos. And I think I think it's quite astonishing that there are schools being built without libraries, because the online world can't deliver that. So a school has to have a library. Then if you get into the habit of thinking library, that's a nice place, and maybe I can go and get something there which I can't afford. Then, even if you don't get that habit at school, then you're not going to get it at any time. And obviously, everybody wants their local library to adapt and to survive. But I mean, worlds do change, and libraries do have to move on and change and be more inviting. There is still a library near me it's a little uninviting, but the ethos of having somewhere that's free, that's local, where you can go in and get hold of something which you wouldn't have at home, if we lose that, it'll never come back. So I'm not on Terry's side, really.
Okay. We've just got time for one more question. Obviously, there may be a lot of budding writers potentially watching this. Do you have any sort of tips or sort of hints for how students can get into writing, or sort of how to write effectively?
Yeah, well, I mean, I say this as someone who's just written 2 books and is writing on the 3rd. The best advice, which is the time, this goes back a long way, I mean, it's what people always say, but it's about input and output. And if you read loads, and if you have loads of stuff coming in, then maybe you'll have loads of stuff to come out. I don't mean copy, and I don't mean think, I know, I'll write a story about a wizard or a vampire. In fact, avoid those. But read widely. Read stuff that you like. By all means, read stuff that you're not quite sure about. And the more you read, I think the more chance there is that the next thing that you write will be something different or something challenging or something exciting. And I can't really think of anything better than that. And then if you really want to make a point of doing your writing, what I find that helps for me is to write something every day, because you quickly get out of the habit of writing creatively. So if you really do want to make a point of writing and making a success of being an author or a journalist, also write as much as you can. Write stuff for the school paper, the local paper, send in articles. They'll be delighted to have it, but be different and be original.
I think that's a lovely note to end on.
Okay, good.
All that's left for me to do is to thank Simon very much.
Was there anyone watching, as far as you know?
As far as I know, there were people watching, yes. So
Well,
thank you
very
if you were watching, and thank you if you sent in questions as well. You can join us again on Thursday, which is World Book Day itself, where we'll be talking to actor, author and television presenter Tony Robinson. And for more details on that, you can go to tes.co.uk/webchat. But goodbye for now.
Thank you.